Welcome to Stargate SG-1 for the first time still. Not a Star Trek podcast. My name is Jeff Akin, and I'm watching Stargate SG-1 for the first time.
And I'm Brent Allen, and I'm also watching Stargate SG-1 for the 47th time. But for the first time, I am looking for what Stargate is trying to teach us. You know, those good sci-fi messages. Those ones that hold up a mirror to society, give us hope things can be better in the future, or sometimes just teach us how we can be plain better human beings to one another.
Brent, this week we're watching an episode called One False Step. You had it wrong on some things, so I'm just going to...
I did.
One false step.
Yes. Not one small. This is one false.
And my guess last week, I predicted that this would result in a high tension situation. It could blow up at any moment. One false step is going to make everything fall apart. And SG-1 team is somehow going to need to come up with a diplomatic solution to everything.
That is about as high over the ground vague as you possibly could be.
I've learned from the best. Like, that's how you do it.
That's how you get it. You just don't give too many details.
Why don't you tell us about this one?
Well, this is the 19th episode of season 2. You know, they've been toying with the watch order here a little bit lately. This one seems to be pretty unanimously episode 19 of the second season. Original air date January 20th, 1999. Jeff, that is all I have to tell you. It is time to go watch this episode. If you are joining us for the very first time, first of all, welcome. Welcome to the channel. The way this works, Jeff and I are getting ready to watch this episode for the first time right now. We're going to do it together right now. If you are one of the folks who are watching us via video, if you're on YouTube, you're going to catch the reaction version of this where it's all choppy. It'll be about 15, 20 minutes or so. And then at the end, we're going to have our conversation. If you want to see the full unedited version of that video, head over to our Patreon page, link down below, and get that full unedited video.
If you're one of our incredible audio listeners that just recently left us a 5-star review or a star review or a whatever on whatever podcast app you're listening on, you're about to gate into the future. You're going to catch us on the other side where we're going to have that conversation. I'm going to share my first time reaction. Brent's going to share any of those sci-fi messages that he found in the whole thing, and you'll be with us for the whole thing. Brent, let's dive into this bad boy. One false step.
Chevron 7 locked.
All right, Jeff, we have just endured one false step. I'd like to say welcome back to our audio listeners who have now rejoined us. I'm sorry. Jeff, wake up, Jeff. We got a show to do. Jeff, wake up.
You said a thing. It woke me up, and I'm curious. I go back in time and become an audio listener so I can gate past that thing. That's not fair. There was some. I want to start on a high note. There was some cool things in this episode. Very early on, I asked a question. So they have this new thing. It's the first time we've seen it. The UAV flies in. Now they can do like longer distance reconnaissance. But it really hit me that we're getting all this new technology, that's showing up now. That's the whole mission of the Stargate program, right? Is to go out and make contact, find technology, find medicine, find these things. And so like we're just now at this point in the end of the second season, we're starting to get this. My assumption that I'm looking forward to seeing is that's going to be the thing, right? And so over the course of the next many seasons, we're going to start developing more and more technology that puts us on par more with the Gould and some of the Asgard and the other, the Final Four and the Gould and all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of cool. I think it's an important moment in Stargate. Also, Cirque du Soleil guy. So the main Ren Fair alien guy was Cirque du Soleil actor.
Mm-hmm.
It was so dumb and ridiculous what they were doing, but he did a really good job.
Yeah.
Like his face, like I believed him,
So smooth in his movements. Like I've never watched his movements before, but like particularly compared to everybody else, he just glided through that set.
And then the other big thing that came out of this one was our first Tilk Indeed.
Yeah.
So we talked about it during the episode, but for our audio listeners, that's the thing we're going to track now because apparently Tilk says Indeed a lot.
He says it enough for us to like count it. Like, he says it enough that just pull up a gif of Teal'c, 9 out of 10 are him going, indeed.
Okay.
Like, it's his catchphrase, you know?
This during the watch, you said that on paper, this script probably looked pretty interesting, pretty good.
Yeah.
For those of you listening or watching who aren't clear, I hated this episode. And maybe a third of the way through, I was like, I can't wait for this to be over. This is awful. And I knew it was going to be awful the minute alien dude looked in the camera and the music got all dink-a-dink-a-dink, sci-fi comedy thing. And I'm like, oh no, they're going to make it this. And they did. And it was awful. But the idea of this, like to your point on the script, but the idea of this was so cool. Life that's dependent has a symbiotic relationship with sound. What a cool concept, you know?
Yep.
Oh my God. I hope we never have to explore it again. There's two things on this that kind of saved the episode for me. One was Teal'c's fake smile.
Okay.
That was awesome. This episode's almost worth watching just to see that. But the other one was this throwaway line at the very end where Sam's got this hunch about, what's going to happen with the aliens and the plants. Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, how do you know this? And she's like, I talked to my plants. It almost does the wah, wah, wah as the episode ends. But the thing is, like, we now know at the time that we're recording this, we understand that there are for reals mycelial networks, plant networks that exist and that plants communicate. Trees talk to each other. Like, they communicate, they warn each other of things. They move very slowly, over spans of time. Like, we know that plants are much, I won't say sentient, but they're much more active, much more cognitively alive than we had ever assumed. They were, in fact, with some plants, they've even recorded at different frequencies screams, like when we harvest them, which is for our wonderful, amazing vegan friends out there, might poke a hole in some of your theories about cruelty in food. We just didn't see the cruelty with the plants, possibly. But it's just interesting to me that here, 25 years ago, when this episode aired, that's a joke. Now, 25 years later, we understand, no, you do talk to your plants, and you do play music for your plants. And when you do sit under a tree, and like you're calm or you're not calm or whatever, there actually becomes this kind of symbiotic relationship between the two of you where the tree like helps regulate you, and it can change the oxygen content around you to like help your body be good, and it can read those things. This is very new science that's out there, and I don't know a lot about it. I mostly know it because my wife is really into a lot of the tree stuff that's going on, and I had the opportunity and
yeah, well, she would be.
She loves trees, and real honestly, I don't want to tell her story. It's a powerful story, but she sat under a hawthorn tree one time, and she said, like, for the first time in so long, like, she felt this peace that like she couldn't even imagine. And it was only when she was under the tree, and like, when she got up and left, it was gone. Mm-hmm. Prompted her to do a lot of research, and it's like trees, and specifically the hawthorn tree, there's a lot of stuff. It's a fascinating plant. But trees, they'll do that. You lean up against it, you've got problems or good or whatever going on. It senses that, and it does what it can, essentially chemically, biologically, to help accentuate the good in you and bring you to homeostasis and to peace.
Jeff, if I may, I don't know anything that you're talking about right now, and frankly, it all sounds like a bunch of hooey. But here is what I know. My country grandmama told me you should always have live plants in the house. Don't have those fake ones. Live plants. You should have a live plant in every room of the house. Maybe there's something to it.
I think there might be.
Because that old kind of wisdom, that's, I don't know that you can explain much of that through science, at least back in the day, but they just know it works.
That's the thing about science, in our world, and we explored this a little bit in Babylon 5, but until we understand a thing, it's magic. Mm-hmm. And through science, we're able to figure the things out. And I think that a lot of the interactions that we had with plants unknowingly for millennia was magic, essentially. I don't know how it works. I don't know what, but it works. So make sure you do this. But through science, now we're starting to understand why. That there is this feedback loop, this biofeedback model between us and a lot of plants out there. And they can adjust oxygen levels, CO2 levels, whatever that impact us in different ways. I had the opportunity in my state, we're the first state to put psilocybin, magic mushrooms, out for people to. We've regulated them and they're somewhat legalized. And I had the opportunity to sit on the board that helped put a lot of the initial regulations together. And we have confederated tribal nations here in the Pacific Northwest that are a political force. And so they sat on the board. And long story, but they shared a lot about the cultural importance of the mushrooms and the psilocybin to their spiritual life. And they said, putting modern terms on it, they'd say if a member of the tribe experienced a trauma, they would go on what we now call like a vision quest. Essentially go out, they would take the mushrooms, and then through that experience, they would heal that trauma. Mm-hmm. We're doing that now with guides and helping people, but it was just part of their culture. Someone at the meeting asked them, well, they just go out in the middle of nowhere and they take mushrooms. How does it know like what trauma to go to? How does it know what the person needs? And they said, because we're all part of the same fabric. We're all part of the same thing and we all communicate. It knows what's wrong with all of us. And once we have it, it can find the thing that we need to go together. It speaks to a lot. I'm going off on a lot of tangents here, but it speaks to so many things around, like, I think about the God of Spinoza. I think about Minbari religion of, we're all manifestations of the universe and we're all connected. I'm talking a lot about this really cool thing from one throwaway line at the very end of this episode played for laughs. I'm literally trying to make things up to make this episode even a little bit interesting. My question to you, Brent, were there any sci-fi messages in this one that made it worth watching?
No.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
There were some sci-fi messages. I just don't know that it made it worth watching. But I'll go into the ones that I found that were in there. Honestly, it's fairly, in the words of our friends over at Mission Log, bonk bonk over the head. Sam says in a moment, we can't go trampling through the galaxy with no regard for what kind of damage we can do. I mean, this to me is a geopolitical warning. When you get involved in stuff around the globe, you can't just go trampling through there with no regard for the damage you're doing to the society that you're leaving behind. And that's the thing is sci-fi takes to other worlds and other planets and shows us what happens over there. And that should stand in for a metaphor of what we do here within our own macrocosm as a global community. Right. Hammond just goes, look, they're dying. There's only so much we're willing to devote to this. Whether it's our fault or not, we're only going to do so much and then we're moving on. It's sad to be them, right? Sam says, but we did this, so we're responsible. Daniel has a reaction at one point, a rather violent reaction. We're killing a whole race of people here. How can I not care? Jeff, I'll simply say this. May we all be like Daniel and Sam and not like General Hammond.
Yeah.
May we care. Let's just care. I don't know that we'll always have the solutions. I don't know that we'll always be able to get out there and do things right, but we should at least care. Be careful of what we do while we're out there. Fix the things that we break. I think that's we're going to break some stuff. It's going to happen. Like that's an accepted part of being a part of the galactic community. I'm sorry, of the global community, but you got to fix the things you broke. And if you're killing an entire race of people, how do you not care? You've got to care. And turns out this show did exactly what every good Star Trek, I'm specifically naming Star Trek. You take this weird supernatural thing, which actually turns out was very natural, and then you scienced it. Mm-hmm. It went from a moral problem to we fixed it with science. Turns out they were actually still responsible, but we can go in and fix it and we're all good. Everybody feels good and we can make a little plant joke here at the end. Ha 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 ha. Let's move on. That's what I got. And Jeff, I don't think I could say anything better than what I just said a moment ago. Let's move on.
Yeah. I'll add one piece before you rate it, because what you were saying really reminded me, there's a concept out there of stewardship, right? Caring for things and using things that don't necessarily belong to you. Used in a lot of religious contexts. It's used in, climate change, things like that. But I want to take it to something even more simple. And I think what they kind of tried to do a little bit here, and with some technology that we poked some fun at, but there's a thing out there called the Nordstrom Way, based on the customer service model that Nordstrom stores have. But you can boil the Nordstrom Way into one phrase: leave it better than you found it. That's it. And they talk about that with customer interactions. But it applies here. You know, hey, you messed this thing up, or even if you didn't mess it up, you were there. Leave it better than you found it. Or even just in a microcosm, your kid walks into the kitchen and makes a sandwich or something. Don't just clean up your mess. Clean up the kitchen. Leave the kitchen better than you found it. That's kind of what I got out of what you were just talking through. So how many chevrons do you give this bad boy?
I don't know. It's so hard. We're doing out of 7, you know, which throws the ranking off. I kind of wish I could do this back out of 5. If this was a 5, I think as far as a message goes, the intentionality of the writer, I think it's there.
I guess the point.
Exactly. I think it's really there. I'm having a hard time going 5 or 7, depending on our ranking scale. It's 7 right now. Like, I'm having a hard time saying that because again, there are some places, and I'm going to ding. I think we're dinging people a lot more these days for how, not just how much is the message there, but how well did they discuss it? I think they discussed it quite a bit, but I don't know that they really discussed it. You know, they just sort of let it be there. It was more subtext in what was going on, which is fine. Legitimate way of doing something. I have a hard time not putting my own personal feelings into this particular episode, you know, because my own personal ranking into this episode, because I want to give it like 1 chevron, but I think it clearly deserves more than that as far as the messages piece. So on a scale of 0 to 7, I don't know, Jeff, what do you think? It's 5 chevron episode. Did it light up 5 of them for you?
If we were on the 5 scale, I would think close to a 3. And so, yeah, I think like a 5 out of 7.
A little over half. Yeah. So 4, 5, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Very, very definitive. Not wishy-washy at all. Jeff, I got to rate. This is that. I'm just talking about the message. That's all I'm talking about was the message. And it does seem to be very intentional. Jeff, you get to rank talking about how much we liked, or I guess in this case, didn't like an episode. Jeff, I'm pretty sure I know where this one is going, so I'm going to read our current bottom 5.
Yeah, just know I already typed it in there, so don't read it yet.
I see it. Yeah, I see it in there. The current bottom 5, I will read from top down. Number 13 is Need. 14 is Family. 15 was Bane. 16 is the Dwight Schultz episode Gamekeeper. 17 was the old lady Linnea, Prisoners. Jeff, where do you place One False Step?
I place this one below Emancipation in the first season. This to date is my least favorite episode of Stargate.
Is it below First Commandment from the first season?
It is.
Because to me, First Commandment is below Emancipation.
Wow.
Like if I rank my bottom 3 episodes of Stargate so far, One False Step, actually First Commandment, One False Step, Emancipation.
My bottom 3 for season 1 was Emancipation, Hathor, The First Commandment.
Oh yeah.
I would shake this up and say the bottom 3 so far. I would almost completely agree. I would say One False Step, and then I don't know. It's almost a toss up between Emancipation and First Commandment. I look back on First Commandment, and I think I was very kind to it. Just saying a lot, but yeah, this is the bottom episode, and I hope it stays at the bottom, because if it gets worse than this, Brent, I don't know if I'm going to have what it takes to get through this series.
If it doesn't stay at the bottom, you're not paying attention to the show. Jeff, speaking of next week, would you like to know what we're watching next time?
I would love to know.
We're watching an episode called, you ready? Go back to your kindergarten days. Show and Tell.
Show and Tell.
Get your mind out of the gutter and give us a guess on what you think this episode might be.
My first thought was, and it's not going to be it because it was basically this episode, like they run into a race or a species that can't communicate verbally, so they have to show and tell to try and figure things out.
Darmok.
Yeah, pretty much, right? It's not going to be that. Wow, I don't know. They're gonna run into they're gonna have a visitor come through. I don't know how someone's gonna come to them somehow and bring something with them. Maybe it's a race we've run into before, and like they're like, hey, we have this thing, and they show it, but then as they tell it, we learn bad stuff about it. I really have no idea what this one's going to be about.
You're a good guesser, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks.
You're a good guesser.
Whew.
Well, we will see next time right here on Stargate SG-1 for the first time. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, especially if you've stuck around through this particular episode.
For real.
Don't forget, wherever you are, to subscribe to the channel. We got lots of stuff happening here are we calling it By Nerds yet? I hope we're calling it By Nerds. By
I think we're there. Right.
Bye, nerds.
There it is. Yeah. We got Babylon 5. We got Stargate. We've got other stuff in the pipeline. Who knows what's happening by the time this episode airs. Please, wherever you find this show, leave us a rating and review if at all possible. It just helps other people know how awesome stuff is that's happening out here, which helps to grow the community and does all sorts of good stuff for us. Please share this podcast, share the show with somebody you know that needs to get into Stargate for the first time or just needs to revisit it. Maybe take a look at it in a way they've never seen it before. So until next time, guys, we're going to get out of here. And
hey, Brent.
You really want to prolong this, Jeff?
Just a little bit, because I had another thought.
Okay.
I said this was my least